Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the soggy, smoky, and slightly root-flavored world of a 17th century European witch's breakfast. Not the glamorous spellcasting version. This is the muddy shoes, sore back, is that edible side of things. Spoiler, you might not survive day one. And even if you do, your teeth probably won't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and the current time in the comments. I want to know which corners of the world are staying up with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to wet straw poking your cheek. It rained last night, again, and your shelter is, let's say, more metaphorical than practical. Your fingers are cold. You're hungry. And you're not walking into a quaint breakfast nook with fresh bread and jam. You're crawling into a forest that smells like mushrooms and damp bark. Breakfast, for someone branded a witch in 17th century Europe, is not about flavor or nutrition. It's about not dying. You forage in silence, keeping your eyes low, your hands quick. Edible roots like wild carrots or parsnips are the holy grail. They're stringy, hard to chew, and taste like the earth's basement. But hey, fiber. You spot a patch of dock leaves. Not exactly exciting, but they're edible and slightly sour. A few dandelions too. You chew their bitter stems while your mind races. Asterisk, is it Thursday? Did the blacksmith's wife give birth yet? Was she still blaming me for the milk spoiling? Asterisk. You dig under a tree trunk and find a small cluster of wood sorrel. Jackpot. It's tart, almost lemony. At least your breakfast has a little personality today. Not every morning is this lucky. Sometimes it's just bark. You peel strips from young trees, trying to remember which ones won't make you puke. Birch? Safe. Ash? Usually okay. Elm? You tried that once. Never again. Oh, and mushrooms? Tricky business. The ones you know are edible are seasonal. And the other ones? Well, historians are still debating whether some so-called witches were simply foragers who got unlucky. Or maybe high. Or both. You remember a night when Agnes, she's more of a hedge healer than a witch, really, boiled a reddish mushroom into a broth. You each took a sip and ended up singing to a mossy rock for 2 hours. Harmless fun or spiritual awakening? Academic circles still can't decide. But back to this morning. You pull out a stubborn root. Long, knobby, possibly a wild salsify. You wipe it on your apron, sniff it, then take a bite. It's bitter, fibrous, somehow gritty even though you try to clean it. But it fills your mouth, and you're less empty than you were before. That counts as winning. There's a strange kind of wisdom in this hunger. You've learned to read the soil like a book. To notice where ants cluster, there might be sweetness nearby. To sniff the air for the peppery smell of garlic mustard. To know that if the toads are quiet, a fox might be nearby. And where foxes go, small berries sometimes grow. And here's something odd. There are rumors that some witches eat clay. Not metaphorically. Actual clay. Supposedly it binds to toxins. Or it's a ritual. Or just a desperate act when food runs out. There's no clear record. Some scholars dismiss it. Others find clay deposits near old witch caves and raise their eyebrows meaningfully. By mid-morning, you've gathered a small pile. Roots, greens, maybe a handful of wild peas if you're lucky. No fire yet. You don't risk smoke in daylight. So you chew raw. The taste is sharp, green, and vaguely medicinal. But it gets you through the next hour. You wonder how other women do it. The married ones, the hidden ones, the ones still pretending they aren't witches. Maybe they get bread. Maybe they sneak eggs. But you? You get roots, mud, and the occasional miracle of something sweet, like a stolen crabapple or a few underripe berries. Your stomach growls, not from hunger, but from protest. You swallow a bite of sorrel and wipe your mouth with a leaf. Time to keep walking. You heard the widow near the river might trade goat milk for some comfort leaves, if you make it before sundown. And so breakfast ends. No toast, no jam, just another bite of root, another prayer to the forest, and maybe, just maybe, a spell murmured under your breath to make tomorrow taste a little less like dirt. The road to the village is muddy, like always. It sticks to your shoes, your skirts, your soul. But today's a market day, which means two things: noise and the possibility of something edible that didn't grow out of a ditch. You pull your hood low. No one calls you a witch out loud anymore, but they think it. You feel it in the way they don't meet your eyes, in the space they leave around you like you're carrying fleas, or worse, secrets. The market square hums with life. Children dart between baskets of onions. Geese honk somewhere near the butcher's stall. The baker's already yelling about his crust being blessed by Saint Margaret, which is probably a stretch, considering it smells like over-fermented rye. But you're not here for blessed bread. You're here for what's under the table. First stop, Marta the herb wife. She's technically respectable, but only because her husband once cured the priest's rash. You nod to her, and she raises an eyebrow like she's trying to decide whether to talk to you or pretend to be rearranging radishes. You help her decide. I need the usual, you say quietly. She sighs. Under the squash, you reach beneath a crooked pyramid of yellow gourds and pull out a cloth pouch. Inside, dried stinging nettles, a few curled pieces of wild cherry bark, something labeled asterisk, not nightshade, wink. Asterisk classic Marta. You pass her a small jar of lard infused with calendula. She inspects it like a merchant inspecting gold. Then she nods, and the transaction is done. No coin, just trade. And plausible deniability. Further down the row, you spot Gertie, the beekeeper's widow. She sells wax. But more importantly, she sells honeycomb that's almost fresh, tucked deep in linen folds, just soft enough to mash into porridge or tea. Some say she also adds poppy resin if you ask with the right words. Still looking for food? She whispers, eyes on your bag. Or just chasing recipes from the moon? You smirk. A bit of both. She passes you a triangle of honeycomb that smells faintly of rosemary. Don't eat it all at once. Or do. Depends what you're trying to forget. And this is the dance. You're not the only one shopping for strange ingredients. That man with the feathered hat? Definitely sniffing around for powdered root bark. The miller's wife? She just handed over a loaf and got something back that smelled like burnt cloves in winter. You all pretend you're buying carrots. But under the carrots are stories. Some say the market's where witches get their power, not from the forest, but from old women who've outlived 3 husbands and now sell grief salt in reused spice tins. Others say that no real witch would be caught in a crowd, but honestly, it's the best place to vanish. You pass the fishmonger, who gives you a look like you once cursed his haddock. You did, actually. You ignore him and step into the shadow of the old well. There, tucked behind a crate of withering apples, is a girl named Elsbeth. She's 13, smells like lavender oil and wood smoke, and is quickly becoming your best supplier. Today, she has a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. For you, she says. My grandmother swears this'll keep away nightmares. You unwrap it. A dried hedgehog's foot, possibly, a pinch of valerian, and a small strip of cloth with red thread embroidery. There's debate in scholarly circles about whether folk charms like this actually worked or were just symbolic comfort. But honestly, sometimes comfort is magic enough. You give her a single copper coin, not because she asks, but because she deserves to learn the rhythm of exchange. As you turn to leave, you spot a man in a long brown cloak watching you from beside the cider stand. His eyes are too still, his face too unreadable. You don't panic, but you make a mental note to take the long way home. Back at the edge of the market, you stop to breathe. Your satchel is heavier. Your stomach is still empty, but your hands are full of possibility. The food witches eat isn't always grown. It's gathered, traded, whispered about behind barrels. It smells like nettle and lard, like honey and something you can't name. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. That's part of the risk. You bite into a piece of raw turnip to calm your nerves. It's sharp, cold, alive. You're grateful for it, even if you have no salt. As the bell tower tolls midday, you step off the square and vanish back into the hedgerows. You've got ingredients to sort and a recipe to try. If the beeswax melts right, you might actually eat warm porridge tonight. Maybe. You're kneeling in the shade of a mossy tree trunk, eyeing a cluster of mushrooms that look suspiciously like tiny, smug umbrellas. One of them has a crimson cap and little white dots. Beautiful, deadly, tempting. You don't touch it yet. This is the part of being a so-called witch that no one warns you about. The constant guessing game between food, medicine, and murder. Or at least a long nap that you may or may not wake up from. You pull a small knife from your belt and gently pry up a pale brown mushroom, checking its gills. White. Not good. Could be Amanita verosa, also known as the destroying angel, which is not nearly as poetic when it's leaking out your ears. You mutter, mostly to yourself, pretty doesn't mean safe, but sometimes it does mean dinner. It's no wonder historians still argue over whether early herbalists and midwives were witches, scientists, or something in between. The records are sketchy, the recipes inconsistent, and half the knowledge came from someone's aunt's neighbor's cousin who once saw a deer eat that one mushroom and not die. It's hardly peer-reviewed. Still, you've picked up enough over the years to spot a few treasures. There, just behind the rotting log, is some chickweed. Not exciting, but edible. Further in, wild thyme. A whin. Then a flash of soft blue petals, asterisk borage star. The leaves smell cucumbery, and if dried right, they go nicely in calming teas. Or so you've heard. You mostly use it to impress the suspicious-looking cows. You pause at a patch of mandrake. Not the shrieking baby root version. This is a less dramatic cousin. But it still holds power. According to some, it can ease pain. According to others, it can open the gates to the spirit world. Or both. Depends on how long you steep it and whether Mercury is in retrograde. Which, in fairness, is always debatable in 17th century Europe. Your hands are stained green from the leaves you've crushed between your fingers, testing oils, textures, scents. Your fingernails are chipped. Your eyes sting a little from rubbing too close to the RUEI in your satchel now. 3 decent mushrooms, boletus, not flashy, but safe-ish. A few sprigs of lemon balm. A crushed peppermint leaf. Something that might be henbane, but you're not betting dinner on it. There's a myth that witches used henbane and belladonna to create flying ointments. Whether they actually flew is still up for debate. Historians argue whether flying meant tripping so hard you forgot gravity. If that's true, then yes, you've flown. Once. In a barn. It ended with bruises and a deep distrust of goose feathers. You remember that time Agnes misidentified a mushroom and gave it to poor Walter as a digestion helper. He spent 2 days yelling at the moon and calling the well his brother. No lasting harm. Except now the village children whisper that Walter saw something. Agnes swears it was just bad luck. Academic circles might call it pharmacological overexcitement. You call it Tuesday. Still crouching, you notice a rabbit watching you. It twitches its nose, clearly judging your technique. Or maybe just hoping you drop some mint. You pluck a stem of mugwort. It smells like dreams and old books. Used in teas, smudges, foot baths, and, allegedly, to summon visions. You tried it once. All you got was a strong urge to alphabetize your herb jars. As you move on, you spot a suspicious patch of nightshade. The berries are shiny, glossy, very much, eat me if you want to gamble with your intestines. You don't even get close. But you do admire their commitment to aesthetic. Witches may have rough lives, but we respect good presentation. You sit back for a moment, glancing up at the leaves swaying above you. This forest doesn't feel dangerous. It feels honest. The plants are what they are. It's humans who can't make up their minds. You pocket one last herb, self-heal, a humble purple flower, and dust off your hands. Today's harvest might not be glamorous, but it's powerful, useful, potentially edible, and that's good enough. You head back toward your cottage, wondering how you'll combine today's finds. Soup, ointment, or another experimental tea that may or may not cause temporary loss of toenail sensation. You'll decide later. For now, the important thing is, you didn't die, you didn't poison yourself, and you've got enough herbs to last a few more weird, wonderful meals. Just avoid the pretty mushrooms. At least until next week. The pot is older than you, blackened with soot, dented along one edge from a failed attempt at cooking over river rocks, and somehow always smelling faintly of rosemary, even when it's empty. You set it on the hearthstone, add a few twigs, and start coaxing a fire to life. No one talks about how much of a witch's day is just cooking, not magical feasts under blood moons. Just soup. Weird soup. Sometimes terrible soup. But soup nonetheless. You fetch a bucket of river water and pour it in. It's a little cloudy, but you whisper a quick charm under your breath, just in case it's the kind of cloud that causes stomach cramps. Scientific? No. Comforting? Yes. Into the pot goes a generous handful of nettles, already wilted from yesterday's harvest. Nettles sting when raw, but once cooked, they mellow out like old arguments. Add a few leaves of goosefoot, which taste like spinach's wild cousin who never bathes. A wild onion, slightly bruised, joins the party. You poke the pot with your spoon. It's more of a stick, if we're being honest. Stirring, you start humming. Every witch you know hums while cooking. It helps the broth find its mood. A few crushed walnuts go in next. Protein, texture, crunch. You think briefly about that squirrel who was eyeing your stash this morning. He'll have to wait. Winter's coming, and you don't share food with rodents who mock you. You check your herb shelf. Dried thyme. Perfect. A pinch. Then a tiny dried apple slice for sweetness. Just one, because fruit is luxury. A sliver of old turnip. And, because you're feeling fancy, a whisper of mint. You taste it. It tastes green. Like boiling a garden shoe. Better than yesterday, though. That soup tasted like betrayal. To improve things, you drop in a shard of sourdough crust. It disintegrates slowly, thickening the broth into something that looks like food instead of punishment. Progress. Witches, it turns out, are excellent cooks. Not because they use spells, but because when you're stuck with questionable roots and expired cheese, you get creative or you starve. That, and you learn how to hide flavors. Nettle bitterness, cut with dried rosehip. Weird texture, mash it and call it rustic. Some say witches added frog legs or bat wings. You've never seen that. More often, it's leftover cabbage and mystery grains from someone's pantry. Batwing might have just been a charred mushroom. Honestly, historians still can't agree whether those grim ingredients were literal or just metaphors for, I ran out of salt. You ladle a spoonful into a bowl. It's steaming, murky, and smells like something your grandmother might have made if she lived in a damp cave and hated joy. Still, you're hungry. The first sip burns your tongue slightly. Good. That means it's hot enough to distract from the taste. Second sip is better. By the third, you're convinced it's not half bad. You sprinkle a final dash of dried yarrow on top. Not for flavor, but for the satisfying feeling of doing something extra. Presentation matters, even if no one else sees it. You sit on a crooked stool, bowl in hand, and sip slowly. The fire crackles. Outside, a crow caws once, like it's judging your seasoning. You talk to your soup. Not bad, huh? The soup doesn't answer. Which is good. The last time something answered, it turned out to be a drowned beetle. As you eat, your mind drifts. To recipes you've memorized, ones you've made up, and ones you wish someone had taught you. Witches don't get cookbooks. They get stories. Hints. Boil it until it smells like rain, or add enough salt to match a sailor's regret. There's a common saying among women like you. Asterisk. If the soup heals the body, it's medicine. If it quiets the mind, it's magic. If it tastes good, well, that's just a miracle. Asterisk, and you could use a miracle tonight. You sip the last of the broth, chew the softened greens, and feel your belly settle. No bells, no visions, no demons summoned. Just warmth, flavor, and the comfort of knowing that even in a world that thinks you're a threat, you still get to enjoy hot soup. You scrape the bowl clean. Save the pot water for tomorrow. It'll stew into something new. Something different. Something hopefully less moss-adjacent. You place the spoon stick aside, wipe your hands on your apron, and smile at the pot like it just told a good joke. Tomorrow, you'll try mushrooms. Or beans. Or something stolen from the market if you're brave. Tonight, you've made soup. And that's more than enough. You wake up to the smell of bread. Not your bread, unfortunately. It's drifting in from the village square, warm and slightly burnt. It makes your mouth water. Makes your stomach growl. Makes you remember a time when you could just buy a loaf instead of bartering dried herbs and plausible deniability. You haven't had real bread in weeks. Not since your last trade with the potter's sister, who gave you a hunk of coarse rye in exchange for some wild comfrey. You ate it in silence, chewing slowly like it was gold, but bread, as you've learned, is a risky luxury. You walk down the path toward the village, hoping maybe someone dropped a heel or a crust, something. That's when you hear the shouting. Old Martin, the tanner, is yelling about ghosts again. He's pointing at the clouds. Yesterday, he was convinced the sky was bleeding. The day before that, he danced in the fountain and accused a sheep of reading his thoughts. The villagers whisper that he's cursed, or that you hexed him, or that he finally drank too much of his own leather soak. But you know better. It's the bread. See, most of the poor in this village eat rye. They have to. Wheat's expensive, barley's unreliable, and rye grows in rough soil. It's the only grain that survives long winters and stingy landlords. But rye has a secret. When the weather's just right, damp, warm, humid, the grain grows a fungus called Claviceps purpurea. You don't see it in flour, but it's there. And when baked into bread, it doesn't just sit quietly. It wakes up. The villagers don't know the word ergot. Most historians didn't either, until much later. But you know it. Or at least, you've seen what it does. Convulsions, visions, burning sensations in the limbs, wild laughter, rashes, panic, sometimes death. They call it St. Anthony's fire. You call it Tuesday in the market square. You tried warning someone once. Told Marta her flowers smelled off. She laughed and called it extra yeasty. Then she spent 3 days thinking the priest's goat was the Virgin Mary. The worst part? Sometimes the hallucinations feel good. People say they see things. That truths are revealed. You've heard them whisper that maybe the witches aren't crazy. Maybe they know. And that's where the trouble starts. Because suddenly, bread isn't just food. It's a story. A story the body tells the mind, with hallucinations as punctuation. And in a world where people are already scared of women who know too much, a few shared bread-fueled visions are all it takes to spark a trial. You remember the case of Annika, the miller's widow, accused of summoning demons when 3 children in her street started speaking in tongues. The demons left after the flour ran out. Historians still debate that one. You reach the baker's stall. He's setting out loaves, round, cracked, dusted in ash. You lean in, sniff. A bit sour. Maybe safe. Maybe not. He notices you and stiffens. No coin. No bread, he mutters. You shrug. Got dried sage. He eyes your pouch. 2 pinches. You narrow your eyes. 1. A tense silence. Then he nods. You trade. He gives you a small heel. Rough, brown, solid enough to be used as a weapon. You tap it on the table. It sounds like furniture. Still, you're grateful. You bite it slowly, tasting earth, smoke, and just a whisper of something metallic. You pause. Could be normal. Could be not normal. You squint at the clouds, just in case they're about to start whispering your name. You wrap the rest in a cloth and slip it into your satchel. You'll toast it later. Or soak it in soup. Or grind it into crumbs and pretend it's something fancier. Bread isn't just sustenance here. It's hope. It's danger. It's folklore. It's the thin line between surviving and seeing angels in your stew. And no matter what they say, you didn't put magic in their bread. The mold did. You just know how to chew carefully. It's just past midnight. The air smells like wet hay and smoke, and your cloak is already damp with dew. You're crouched behind a half-collapsed fence, watching cows breathe steam into the dark like lazy dragons. You're not here to hex the livestock. You're here for the milk. Not just any milk. Mind you, *midnight milk star. A fresh, warm pail drawn while the moon is full and the village is asleep. Some say it's just superstition. Others swear it tastes sweeter, calms the nerves, heals coughs, and makes babies sleep through the night. Or dreams longer. Or better. You've never seen proof, exactly. But in your experience, the placebo effect is just another kind of spell. The barn is quiet. You've done this before. Old widow Gerda keeps her cow near the edge of the pasture. The animal's a gentle thing named Marjorie, who seems mostly indifferent to who's pulling her udders, so long as it's done politely. You slip inside, whispering nonsense to keep yourself calm. You step over the creaky board, pat the door frame like it's an old friend. Your breath fogs in the air. Your heart thumps. Stealing milk isn't exactly noble, but it's not evil either. More like resourceful trespassing. You find the pail. Still warm. Still half full from evening milking. You whisper a quick thank you to Marjorie, who blinks at you with her enormous cow eyes like you've interrupted a dream. The milk is thick, whole, rich. It smells faintly of hay and warmth, and something unnameable that makes your chest loosen slightly, like safety. You've heard all the stories. That witches steal milk and butter from afar using charms. That they can dry up a cow's udders with just a glance. That they nurse their familiars with stolen cream. You've also heard that if you spin widdershins around a cow 3 times, she'll speak your future in riddles. That one hasn't worked. Yet. You carry the pail carefully, wrapped in your shawl to stop it sloshing. Back in your hut, you set it by the fire and add just a pinch of dried lavender. A habit you learned from Marta, who once told you it tames the dreams. Or at least makes them smell like fancy soap. You sip slowly. The milk is warm, silky, a little grassy. You close your eyes and imagine, just for a moment, that this is what peace tastes like. Not soup, not bark, not sour bread. Just this. You remember a time, not long ago, when Anna from the Hill was accused of witchcraft after being found with 4 full butter churns in spring. No one could explain how she got that much cream so early in the season. They didn't consider that she was just good at cows, or that she probably had a deal with a milkmaid from 2 valleys over. The court wasn't interested in dairy logistics. Historians still squabble over whether so-called milk magic was literal or metaphorical. Did witches steal food? Or just blame for everyone else's bad luck? You take another sip. In some versions of the legend, witches whisper over the milk to imbue it with moonlight. In others, the milk becomes moonlight. A silvery drink that lets you speak with spirits, find lost things, or sleep dreamlessly. You've tried whispering to your milk. Once it curdled. Once it didn't. It's unclear if that was because of the incantation or because the pail wasn't clean. You pour the rest into a small clay jug, save half for tomorrow, and let the steam rise into the rafters. You wonder, as you always do, why this is seen as suspicious. A woman, alone, getting her own food, making her own medicine, sitting by her own fire. What part of that looks like danger? Probably all of it. You set the jug beside your bed. Tonight, your dreams might be gentler. If the stories are true, the milk will soothe the nerves, settle the heart, soften the edges of memory. And if the stories aren't true, well, it's still milk. And it's warm. And you didn't die getting it. Tomorrow, Gerda might notice. She'll mutter about shrinking yields or lazy cows. Maybe she'll blame the wind. Maybe she'll blame you. But tonight, the moon is high, the milk is warm, and Marjorie the cow was kind. And sometimes that's enough. You've never seen the thing that knocks, but you've heard it. It comes after sunset. Always after sunset. 3 soft taps, like knuckles wrapped in wool, or claws that regret being claws. You don't answer. You don't breathe too loud. You just reach for the salt. Salt is cheap, they say. A humble thing. But in your hands, it's armor. You spoon it from the earthenware jar with reverence, scattering it slowly along the windowsill in a line so even it could shame a compass. At the threshold, you pour a careful circle. You add rosemary this time. Not because it's necessary, but because it makes you feel clever. And you need cleverness more than strength these days. This isn't about seasoning. This is about rules. Salt obeys them. Monsters don't. You grew up hearing tales. Of witches who licked salt to remember who they were, of devils who screamed when it touched them, of ghosts trapped in circles so tight they wept at the edges, never able to step out. But no one ever tells you why salt works. They just say it does. Maybe it's pure. Maybe it's ancient. Maybe it's just so small, so stubborn, that even the darkest thing can't bear to cross it. You know how to use it. That's what matters. Some say a line of salt keeps evil out. Others say it keeps things in, thoughts, grief, memories. You suspect both are true, especially the grief part. Your old friend Marta used to say, a clean hearth, a ring of salt, and something boiling, that's safety. She died last winter, and now her name tastes like smoke when you say it aloud. So you don't. Instead, you keep the kettle hot. You sweep the hearth. You pour the salt. Tonight, you use the fine stuff, the white kind that stings your fingers. You trail it along the floorboards in the shape of a horseshoe, then again in the shape of a star, just in case one works better than the other. You don't believe in demons. Not really. But belief isn't a requirement for consequence that you've seen enough strange things. Strangers who don't blink, cats that won't enter certain rooms, dreams that come back with scratches, that you've learned to prepare. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. You light a candle, beeswax, short-wicked, with a bit of lavender pressed into the side. You stare at the door. Nothing moves. That's the thing about salt. It doesn't banish. It doesn't attack. It just prevents. A quiet kind of magic. The kind that's always ready but never showy. People used to wear salt pouches around their necks. You still do sometimes. Sewn into the hem of your cloak, hidden from the village priest and his endless suspicion. He once asked why you smell like soup and seawater. You told him it's protection. He laughed. Let him. When soldiers passed through last spring, someone carved a symbol into your door. You don't know who. You don't know what it meant. But afterward, the birds stopped perching on your roof, and the milk curdled early for 2 weeks. So now there's salt on the doorstep. Always. And iron nails beneath the threshold. And a sprig of yarrow, tied with red thread, dangling above the lintel like a charm pretending not to be a charm. You try not to think too hard about what you're keeping out. The world is full of names you're not supposed to say. But in the silence, you still listen. Tap, tap, tap. You don't answer. You never do. Instead, you check the lines again. Carefully. Slowly. A pinch more at the window. A dash at the chimney mouth. Then you return to your chair, sip your tea, and wait for morning. The knock comes again. Softer this time. Almost polite. You whisper to yourself, just once. This is my house. My salt. My door. And the night holds its breath. The first time you fed them, it was an accident. A crust of barley bread left out overnight. By morning, it was gone, and in its place, a smooth pebble, black as soot and round as a coin, perched neatly on your sill. You weren't sure what it meant. Still aren't. But you left more crumbs the next day. And the next. Now it's a ritual. Quiet. Wordless. Mutual. They come at dawn, 3 of them. 1 large, 2 smaller. You've given them names you don't speak aloud. Names like Thorn and Pitch and Little Trouble. They don't caw like ordinary birds. They click, sharp, deliberate sounds, like someone cracking knuckles inside your walls. You've grown to like it. In a village like yours, where memory is slippery and rewritten by those with louder voices, the crows are a kind of truth you can't find elsewhere. They remember. They always remember. When the miller lied about who burned the hay last summer, the crows circled his barn for 6 days straight. When old Barda fell into the well, one left a fishbone at her son-in-law's doorstep. When the constable accused you of tampering with the well bucket, a crow dropped a cherry pit into his tea. They don't take sides. They keep records. You've begun to think of them less as birds, more as archivists. Once, when fever took you and your sleep cracked open into strange, flickering dreams, you saw 1,000 black eyes blinking in unison. You woke with feathers on your windowsill and a sense that something had been filed. Crows aren't kind, but they're fair that you've read that in some lands, people call them omens. Elsewhere, messengers. In your home, they're simply neighbors with long memories and no patience for dishonesty. You wonder sometimes if they were human once, or if they'll be human next. Your grandmother used to say that a crow never forgets a kindness or a cruelty. She kept a perch on her roof, just for them. Said it kept the worst of winter away. At her funeral, dozens gathered on the chapel steeple. Silent. Watching. Not a single one flew until the priest finished the final blessing. You remember that. The villagers don't talk about the crows unless they have to. No one owns them. No one feeds them but you. And still, the birds know. They know who stole the lace off the altar. Who breaks things quietly at night. Who keeps secrets too close to their chest. You've never asked them to help you. That feels like a line too far. But one morning, when your door had been scratched in the night, 3 long, deliberate gouges, you left a smear of lamb fat on the sill. No bread. The scratches never came back. Some people train dogs. Some pray to saints. You leave offerings for things with wings and vendettas. Point one day, you find a red string tied in a knot beside your mug. No one in the house admits to it. But the next morning, all three crows bow when they land. Not a deep bow, not human, but deliberate. You bow back. Sometimes you wonder what your offerings are buying. Protection? Memory? Or simply neutrality in a world where everything has begun to feel like a negotiation? You don't mind. The bread is stale anyway. They keep coming. They watch everything. And when they leave gifts, shiny buttons, twigs arranged in runes, a worm coiled into the shape of a question mark, you don't ask what they mean. You just say thank you, quietly, and leave more scraps. The moon has thinned to a sliver. The rabbits have gone quiet, and the last berries shriveled on their stems days ago. You sit by your doorway, chewing the leathery edge of your last dried mushroom, counting how many moons it will take before the elder nettles rise again. This time of year, food isn't just scarce. It's mean. Everything bites back. Bitter roots, stringy bark. Even the snow stings your throat when you try to eat it. In some years, you've resorted to boiling shoe leather. This year, you're trying boiled lichen instead. It's like drinking mossy socks, but it keeps the ache down. You dream of food you read about once. Roasted chestnuts, hot oatcakes, even cheese. Cheese. Real cheese. Not the sour lump of curdled goat milk you tried to press beneath a stone. That one grew eyes. And a tongue. You buried it. But hunger has its wisdom. It teaches you to make do with the unspeakable. That old wasp nest in the rafters? Roasted to ash, it thickens broth. Mouse bones, boiled long enough, become almost broth themselves. Once, in a particularly lean winter, you found a clutch of owl pellets. You boiled them. You don't like to talk about that winter. Still, you survive. You always do. The villagers whisper about your unnatural health, about how you must be eating something unholy. They're right, in a way. You eat what they won't, what they can't. You eat the cold. You chew shadows. You let your hunger teach you names for things that don't exist in their world. This is why, when spring comes and they knock on your door asking for something to make the milk come back, or a tea for growing strong, you don't slam the door. You remember that they, too, know hunger. Just not the kind that sits in your bones and makes your teeth feel like hollow reeds. Tonight, you'll chew pine bark and imagine lamb stew. You'll wrap yourself in every scrap of warmth and dream of a world where witches are well fed. That world may not exist, but in this one, you are still here. Still hungry. Still you. You know what the villagers think you eat. They think you dine on the hearts of unbaptized children, stirred into stew with toad eyes and wolf fur. They imagine your pantry lined with jars of powdered sin, your cellar stocked with mead fermented from graveyard soil. They've whispered stories about you slurping black broth by candlelight, while a demon, shaped like a goat, or a man, or both, licks your fingers clean. Sometimes, when you're especially hungry, you wish just one of those stories were true. You wish you had a pact, a spell, a secret, a shortcut. You wish food would appear when you lit the right number of candles or whispered Latin backwards. But all your magic is small and practical. It looks like foraging in the rain, like drying roots before the mold sets in, like not crying when your last onion sprouts and dies in your hand. Their fear feeds you in its own way. They leave bread at your doorstep, not out of kindness, but fear. They toss you bruised apples and call them curses. You say thank you. But late at night, you wonder if the real spell is this: survival. Staying alive in a world that has already decided you shouldn't be. Finding warmth in stolen kindling, sweetness in stolen moments, nourishment in things no one else sees as edible. Because yes, you are a witch. You speak the names of plants under your breath. You know what time of year squirrel meat turns too oily. You know how to keep a potato alive until it grows children. But more than that, you are a woman who has learned how to live on almost nothing, who has turned bitter leaves into soup and loneliness into legend. They will never know what you actually eat. And that, too, is a kind of power. It begins with small mistakes. You reach for garlic and find grief. You try to say bread and say blessing instead. Your mouth misfires. Your thoughts loop. Your memory once sharp as a birch switch, begins to blur at the edges. You forget if you've eaten today. You forget what day it is. You forget, for a moment, why you're hiding in the woods at all. Hunger reshapes your mind. You spend half a day searching for a pot you buried under leaves, only to realize you already used it, already cleaned it, already hid it somewhere else. One evening, you stir a pot of hot water and would bark, whispering to it like a mother to a sick child. You genuinely believe, for a few shimmering seconds, that kindness might turn it into stew. It doesn't. You scrape lichen off tree bark and chew it, hoping for even a faint trace of bitterness. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just coats your tongue like dust. You try dried flowers. You try moss. You even try the corner of an old book, wondering if the ink might be made of berries. It isn't. It tastes like ash and mildew. But you chew and swallow anyway. There's no pride left to lose. You begin to see things. The toadstools glow faintly at dusk. You see saints in the patterns of frost. The crows talk in riddles. You drop a spoon and cry for 10 minutes. You laugh when nothing is funny. You weep when wind brushes your face. You tell your own shadow to be quiet and mean it. Once, you find yourself halfway through muttering a blessing, only to realize it's not one you learned from the church. It's something older, wilder, something your mother used to say when the firewood was wet and the hunger was worse. Another time, you think the moon is trying to feed you. You open your mouth to the sky. Even in this fog, some part of you remains clear. Deep inside, below the shivering and the spells and the sorrow, you still recognize danger. You still know not to eat the shiny red berries. You still test mushrooms with a silver needle when you can find one. You still remember how many days it's been since you last found real food. And you remember what hunger does, not just to the body, but to the soul. Medieval theologians once wrote that starvation could open a door between the earthly and the divine, that a soul, when stripped of comfort, might touch something holy or something monstrous. You're not sure which one you're touching now. You dream while awake. You walk while dreaming. You try to remember your name and find only silence. The faces of the villagers blur, even the ones who betrayed you, even the ones you loved. You are becoming something else. And yet, every morning, your hands still reach for roots. Your nose still tests the wind for the scent of apples. You still tuck away the smallest crumbs. You still count them, hide them, ration them, bless them, because hunger is not death. It is the waiting room before it. And you, quiet, invisible, wild, you are still waiting. The smell reaches you first. Roast meat, caramelized onions, fennel, thyme, and hot butter. It clings to your skin, your cloak, your hair, like smoke from a sacred fire. You're not even that close. 2 hills away, crouched in the brush like a fox, but still the scent rolls down through the trees like a procession of saints. Your stomach reacts before you do. It folds in on itself. You double over, not in pain exactly, but in some ancient grief your body remembers better than your mind. You bite the side of your tongue just to stay focused. Down below, the village is feasting. Someone's daughter got married, or someone's son came home from war, or someone's pig got too fat to keep. The reason doesn't matter. The feast is real. The bread is fresh. The wine is red. The knives shine. You know that courtyard. You used to walk across it with a bucket of water. You used to pour broth into bowls. You used to be a pair of hands no one noticed, until one day they did. Now, your fingers dig into the cold dirt just to keep from running downhill. You watch them tear bread with their teeth, thick crusts and warm middles, steam rising into the night air. You watch them laugh with their mouths full. You watch someone eat a chicken leg, toss the bone over their shoulder, and reach for more. They waste more in a minute than you've eaten in a day. You feel something sour rise in your throat. Not hatred, not envy. Something worse, remembering. You remember what it was like to be full, to wipe grease from your lips, to fall asleep without shivering, to chew slowly, not because you were savoring it, but because you could. There is music, too, fiddles, tambourines, the occasional shout. It rises into the air like birdsong, and it carries with it a sound you've nearly forgotten. Chewing. You can hear them chewing. It is obscene. It is beautiful. It is a mass. You imagine walking in. Just once. Just to sit at the edge. Just to steal a crust, a crumb, a forgotten skin of broth. You imagine them recognizing you. You imagine them not caring. You imagine them pouring you wine, pressing meat into your hand, saying nothing. You imagine them forgiving you. But imagination is a trap, and you've walked into it too many times before. You stay hidden. You watch. One child tosses a half-eaten apple onto the ground. A dog takes it. Another drops a bun into the fire by accident. No one mourns it. A man, drunk and rosy, pulls a wedge of cheese from his coat and forgets it on the bench. You count it all. Each wasteful gesture. Each unworthy bite. Then, quietly, you begin to cry. Not loudly. Not bitterly. But the kind of crying that happens inside your lungs and behind your eyes. A pressure, a heat, a betrayal. You bury your face in your sleeve. Not because anyone might see, but because you still remember how to hide. Tomorrow, there will be leftovers in the ashes. You will sneak down. You will dig in the dirt behind the barn. You might find a bone or a heel of bread someone stepped on. You'll dry it, bless it, eat it slow. But tonight, you sit with the smell. You let it enter you, fill your throat, sit in your chest like a ghost. You imagine it's enough that it isn't. But you've learned to survive on worse. It burns. Always. No matter how many times you've swallowed it, the first sip still cuts like a blade. It carves a path from your throat down into your belly, hollowing, searing, silencing. But that's why you drink it. You drink it because it shouts louder than your hunger. Because it sings in your bones when the wind tries to take them. Because it makes the voices, those asterisk voices, slip into the background like forgotten songs. It is your warmth. Your food. Your charm against the ache. You used to drink sparingly. A nip of cider here, a ladle of small beer there. Something to take the edge off. Something to share with a friend. But friends are scarce now. And edges are everywhere. So you drink more. You trade roots for it. Herbs. Sometimes a bit of your own blood. Sold to an apothecary who claims to make dream ink from it. Once, you traded an entire charm against wolves just to get a half bottle of something red and spiced. You made that charm yourself. Now the wolves follow you closer. The bottle you carry isn't pretty. Brown glass. Cracked at the neck. Wrapped in old cloth and prayers. But it holds what you need. Forgetfulness. Fermented. When your stomach twists with hunger, you drink. It won't fill you. Not really. But it'll make the pangs blur. Make the silence inside you louder than the silence outside. Sometimes you talk back to it. Sometimes it answers. When your fingers go numb with cold, you drink. Not enough to stop the frost, but enough to make you laugh at it. Enough to let you pretend your hands are warm, your boots thick, your fire just out of sight. When your mind starts slipping, whispers in the trees, faces in the clouds, footsteps that echo too closely, you drink. The liquor draws a curtain between you and the world. You see the shapes, but they don't reach you. You hear the words, but they don't stick, and that's a kind of mercy. Sometimes, you get drunk, not accidentally, not shamefully, but purposefully. You sit beside a dry ditch or a mossy wall, and you drink until the stars spin like a wheel, until the hunger becomes a rhythm, not a pain, until your thoughts become soft animals that curl at your feet and sleep. In those moments, you remember things you've never known. The taste of summer cherries. The voice of a mother you never had. The warmth of a kitchen with no shadows. Alcohol is the one spell no one burned you for. They called your herbs devil's tricks. Your roots, lies. Your whispered songs, dangerous. But the bottle? That they understood. Even the priest drank, didn't he? Even the magistrate. Even the men who spat when you walked by. Wine is holy. Ale is honest. Mead is ancestral. But yours is none of these. Yours is witch's wine. Survival syrup. A hymn in liquid form that you've heard the others whisper about it. She drinks to speak with demons, one said. She drinks to forget her crimes, another guessed. No, you drink because the world is too sharp and your skin is too thin, and because hunger makes your thoughts into knives. You drink because every night feels like a trial, and the bottle is the only gavel you trust. You drink because the firewood is gone. Because the stew you planned turned to mold. because the herbs that once bloomed now wither at your touch. But mostly, you drink because it lets you stay still. Just still enough not to run. Just still enough to remember who you used to be. Or at least forget who you've become. There were spells for hunger. Not many. Not reliable. But they existed. You remember them the way you remember old lullabies. Faintly, with gaps, like frost-eaten cloth. They never filled you the way bread did. But sometimes, they fooled your body into forgetting it wanted to be filled. That was enough. There was a charm your grandmother whispered into boiled bark. You'd chew the softened strips and repeat her words. 3 times, sunwise. Never looking anyone in the eye while you swallowed that it tasted like old wood and ash. But the rumbling would stop. For a while. Another trick. Tying 7 threads. Each dyed with a drop of your own spit. To the root of a burdock plant. Then burying the whole bundle beneath the threshold of your door. The next meal would come within the week, she promised. You tried it once. A rabbit broke its leg on your doorstep 2 days later. You took that as a sign, even if it looked more like misfortune than magic. And then there were the darker spells. The ones they never wrote down. The ones you weren't supposed to use unless things got bad. You know them all by heart. A soup made from your own hair, boiled with nettle and elder leaves. If you spoke the right words, it was said to double your strength and numb your stomach for 3 days. You tried it during the frost of '89. It worked. You still have the bald patch. There's a ritual that binds your appetite to another's. As long as they eat, you feel full. It requires a token, something they've bled on, and a binding not soaked in their shadow. You tried it once. Chose a kind-faced baker who never met your eyes. For weeks, you thrived. Then he died in his sleep. You wept harder than you thought you could. You swore never to do it again, but you still know how. There were spells to turn leaves into meat, stones into biscuits, rain into broth. They were lies, mostly. Pretty lies that cost nothing to try. You did them anyway. Even lies taste better than hunger. And then, the forbidden ones. You learned them from a woman with ink on her teeth and belladonna in her breath. She lived near the marsh. People called her a shadow. You called her auntie. She taught you how to carve hunger out of a body, not by filling it, but by removing the need. A mirror spell. A hunger stopper. It came with a price. Memories of every meal you'd ever loved would be locked away. You used it once. Just once. You haven't tasted strawberries since. Magic was never about miracles. It was about making do. About tricking the body. Bending the rules. Slipping through cracks the church couldn't see. You remember mixing acorns with lard to make butter. You remember boiling moss for hours until it tasted faintly like bread crust. You remember carving symbols into potatoes to make them feel like feasts. You remember whispering thanks to a dead bird's bones. You remember grinding your own nails into powder and stirring them into porridge to strengthen your will. You don't know if it worked, but you felt braver. Hunger teaches you to be inventive, to eat your pride, your past, your principles. You once said grace over a bowl of dirt and boiled water. You once sang a blessing into a rotten apple so it would stop smelling long enough to chew. You once pretended a crust of mold was the beginning of cheese. But above all, you remember the words. The little words. The ones passed from mouth to mouth. Never written, never questioned. Salt keeps the devil from your belly. Speak sweet things, and your bread will rise. Share your last bite, and the forest won't take you. You followed them like commandments. Even now, you sometimes mutter them under your breath. When you find a scrap of crust. When you sip rain from your palm. When your stomach gnaws at itself like a cornered beast that you're not sure they're magic. But they've kept you alive. And isn't that the same thing? You still remember the taste. Not of moss. Not of bark. Not of bones boiled thin or nettle leaves chewed until your tongue stung with bitterness. A real meal. It was late summer. The kind of warmth that makes everything feel soft around the edges. You'd walked 3 miles to an old orchard no one had touched in years, lured by the scent of overripe apples and something else, something warm. Smoke. Not the thick black of firewood, nor the oily curl of tallow. This smoke was thin, scented with thyme and browned onions. You followed it like a spell, like a scent trail cast by God. You found her in the ruins of a shepherd's hut, bent-backed, apron covered in flour. a pot simmering over a fire made of dry apple branches. She didn't ask questions, just nodded at you once and said, "If you help need, you may eat." You still remember the way your fingers sunk into the dough, elastic, alive. You'd almost forgotten what yeast smelled like. She shaped the loaf in silence, let it rise by the fire, and brushed the crust with something golden. Egg, you realized. Egg. You nearly wept. The soup was simple. Turnips, onion, beans that hadn't seen rot. No meat, but a rind of smoked fat clung to the edge of the pot, flavoring everything. And bread. Real bread, with a crust that crackled and an inside so soft it felt obscene. She gave you one bowl, one hunk of bread, and you sat outside on the stone step, sun on your neck, steam curling into your face, and you ate like someone coming back from the dead. You chewed slow. You didn't speak. You let every flavor carve itself into your ribs. There was pepper, actual pepper, just a whisper, but enough to make the turnips taste brave and thyme. Earthy and sharp. And salt. You hadn't tasted salt in weeks. She gave you a sliver of apple tart when the bread was gone. Barely sweet, barely warm, but wrapped in pastry that flaked like dreams. You didn't ask her name. You didn't tell her yours. You simply nodded, and she nodded back, and you walked away with your belly full and your heart aching that you've had nothing like it since. Nothing even close. Everything after has been survival. Root mash, gruel, boiled weeds. Even the moments of plenty, stolen chicken, a pinch of barley, a flask of wine, none of it touched you the way that meal did, because it wasn't just food. It was kindness. It was warmth. It was permission to be fed without shame, to be a guest instead of a scavenger, to sit in the sun and not fear the smoke curling up from a chimney. It was the last time you felt like a person, and the last time you let yourself be one. You don't know what happened to her. If she was caught, if she was accused, if she vanished into the woods or into the fire that you've looked once or twice. Asked in whispers. No one knew her. Maybe she was never real. But the bread was. The soup was. And that memory is the one you carry when the hunger comes too loud. When the world feels sharp and hollow. When your fingers ache from foraging and the wind howls accusations no court has spoken aloud. You close your eyes. And you remember the taste of time. The weight of warm bread in your hand. The crackle of crust beneath your teeth. And for a few minutes, you are full. Not with food, but with something better. Something they can't burn.